Look at this armchair, so curvy, so voluminous. Why don't we talk about curviness and voluminousness in the sense of industrial design sketching?
Let us start with a simple cube, well, in this case a squished cube that I always like to start with, and we sort of transform it into a chair. Okay, here is our chair. So let's say if we want to put an upholstered something here on top of it, a pillow, I am going to draw this pillow as a rectangle first, or a boxy thing, and let's deconstruct this boxy thing, or let's build on it. So first thing that I'm gonna do is just draw this rectangular boxy thing, but I am not going to connect the edges. So I'm just gonna leave those spaces a bit empty for now. And then what we can do here is sort of round these edges here, as you can see, and also gonna round these a little bit like that, and then round this as well. And this already gives us a slightly more rounded surface. Now, moving on to the next one, I'm going to create the same sort of rounded thing without the connections, but this time around I'm not going to keep them straight. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create these also as slight curves. So all of these edges are going to be just slightly curved like that, and just like before I'm gonna do these still rounded, so like just like here. So these are rounded and rounded, but this time around I'm also rounding these aside from those, and at the same time these edges here, they will also stay rounded. And now the whole pillow is a bit more inviting, maybe a bit more even fluffy looking. Now the next step from this would be making this edge also slightly rounded. And for that, just like before we have this, we're going to have these rounded corners here, and here I'm going to double these lines, and that is going to give us the rounding that we need to make this pillow nice and fluffy and round and inviting. So if we want to do like square roundings, I have a video for that. It should be up here in the corner, I think, if everything is correct, somewhere there. But I don't want to apply that. That is a bit too mechanical. So instead we are going, that's why we're going with this more organic approach. And speaking of organic, the next step would be, since here what I'm trying to teach you is, right, we're going sort of almost like with just the outline of this box. So we sort of see that this is the outline. If I bring in the lines here, this is the outline of my box. Now what I did there, I left the corners empty on purpose so I can do my roundings. So if I just close these, the same box is already, it has a feeling of roundness. So even if I just use the dotted line, this one feels more soft and rounded than this one. And then we can go, of course, a step further. We use all very rounded lines everywhere, and then even my dotted lines I'm going to round a little bit, and it feels even rounder. A step further is also like, you should just imagine that you have some sort of outline, let's say this, and then what we can do here is we can imply shape, as always, with a cutting line or a section line. We can do the same thing here, but this makes everything a little clinical. Not the biggest fan of this approach. What I like to do is, if we have this nice outline, nice rounded shape, I give it a face here, and I call it a face. So this side tells me a lot about the subject here. And then if you want, you can also add a little bit of crosshatch like shading, and this will give this fluffy feeling. Something that happens that I use quite often But something that turns my shapes a little bit too mechanic is if we have this edge here and then I do something like this. Now this reminds me a little bit of that super shiny edge that you have on metallic materials. So unless you combine this with some sort of a little bit furriness or bring some furriness in there, this is going to be very shiny. So I would watch out. Sometimes we can use it, but I would watch out with it. Now taking a look at a simple upholstered couch here. So what we have, I am going to start with angular, very hard lines, just so we can see how we can build on this. So this would be my couch if I draw it with very hard lines. And as I say in many of my other videos, it's fine if you use these harsher rectangular lines, because if you draw over them with softer forms that you want to explain, things will fall in line for your eyes and you will only see what you need to see. So this would be the base, and then this comes just a little bit out like that. Then I make sure that here I draw this double sort of line, because I also want to emphasize, so we're going to this here, right? Like we're talking about this thickness there, and I'm doing the same thing here. So I have this shape, I'm just going to double a little bit, giving it this sort of shape. There we go. Then in the back I have these wedge-like backrests. They're not really part of the backrest, they're more part of the armrest. And this I also have on the other side. Don't forget to translate your shapes, so that goes somewhere there. And usually what you want to stay away from is, if you have something like this, this harsh interior edge is the one that makes it a bit wrong. So if I round this up like here, but it's still a bit weird that it's so harsh. So what you can do is just double this line and round those lines as well. And now it's already a bit softer. So also for this line here, I'm just gonna make sure to double it, and that will immediately make it a bit softer. So you can use your single hard edge lines to construct your future rounded shapes. Just take away those edges. So in general, if you just, with a little bit of force, you go over a couple of times and make sure to take away that edge, it should soften all your lines. And then I'll add a cutting line just to explain the shape. And this is an upholstered small little armchair. Now if we move on to something more complicated, I found this armchair on the interwebs. So let's start with the footrest, which would be here. Let me actually start on a new paper. If we look at the shape, we sort of have almost, if we break it down to simple shapes, we should have something like this. So this is something that I'm working on now. If we take this again, and so something that I wanted to show here and I showed here, you can take whatever type of shape, organic shape, and you can mold it how you want. You can make it look however you want with a couple of section lines. So here I can just really define the shape. Using section lines like these, you can reshape your very organic, well, shapes, lines. Okay, so let's come here. I'm going to go immediately with a nice rounded shape. So, well, I'm starting with a rounded shape there, going up, same here, I'm going up, then I'm having a nice rounded shape there, and I'm going down. So don't be afraid to use these hand movements that are a little bit more random looking or a bit wilder, because they will give you these nice results. So I am following this center line here that sort of splits this nicely into two. Okay, now to the actual chair part. So if we look at how it's set up, it's there and it is here. And this is also a nice and rounded shape here at the bottom. You don't see it. You can draw through it, so I wouldn't worry about not drawing through it. If you want to make sure that the line is correct, feel free to draw through it. And then we have this sort of distortion, well, not distortion, but it cuts into two, that's visible, and then this goes down somewhere there. Now, it is important to understand that this is probably a shape like this. So looking at the picture that we have, of course, we have a different angle, but we've all seen chairs before. So it's something like this, but then maybe it is also a bit more rounded. So I would maybe cut off these edges, and then here over this you have this sort of sitting area. So what we're working here with would be something like this, right? And then here this is also probably a little bit more like that. So that's what we have here. So that's why we can sort of see the underside of this sitting area. And I am trying to already incorporate some of these angles. So up here we have this really nice arch that is split nicely into two. We have this backrest that goes a little bit like this, and then we have its edge here, and I'm just going to round it nicely. Same on the other side, we have the edge goes until there, and then we have the headrest area here, which I'm going to immediately do with these nice rounded lines, and this is also following a nice curve there, and we can double this as well. And this also has this center area, and it also follows a little bit of a resting sort of area there. So as you can see, all I'm doing is I'm mostly doubling my lines, making sure that I don't have sharp lines other than here in the middle where I want it to be sharp. So once again, aside from the video that I mentioned in the beginning where we have this cube and we round it off, so aside from this, we can just simply think a little bit ahead and just leave those corners a little bit soft, and then you come in and make sure that work a little bit with your double lines, and with a little bit of cross-hatching here and there, you can imply a little bit of fabric or texture to whatever it is that you're drawing. Returning here for a moment, because this is leather, as you can see, we have a couple of folding lines, especially in areas like this, and this can help us sell the material as well. So you're going to have just a couple of folding lines here and there, which is typical more for leather, because if you would have just a normal fabric, that would follow the shape easier. But with leather, you have these, and this is a nice little giveaway. All right, and then as a finisher, a final reminder. So I talked about the outline. So think in 3D, but concentrate on the outline. Forget what's here in the middle for a second, and forget about these corners as well, because we want to round them. So if you have a shape like this square, you do the outlines, you do the roundings, and then you work in towards it a little bit. You can do this with any shape. You don't have to stick with this square, but the same thing, concentrate on the outline, forget about the inner lines. You don't want to have these sharp edges like you have them here. What you can do instead is just double the lines, because that will take away from the softness, and add some section lines as well. Those will help. Same thing here again, just to reiterate. What we talked about in previous videos as well, you can cut out pieces, then you can adjust them, you can adjust the roundness. And when you're drawing with just lines, and we're not talking about rendering here in this whole video, just doing the lines, you have to pay attention, or you don't have to, but you can play a little bit with cross-hatching. That will give everything sort of a softness as well. And then finally, I want to talk about totally organic shapes like these. You can also mold and shape to your own liking with these cross-section or cutting lines, whatever you prefer. And also adding a little bit of this cross hatching will make them quite a bit more furrier. And with that, we have come to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. You know, hit the like button, subscribe, yada, 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 yada. If you really like this and you want to support me, links to my Patreon and other resources in the description down below. And I also want to thank my Patreons for their lovely support. But as always, the most important thing is that you folks have a great time, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.